Good evening, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, honoured guests. It's a pleasure, Alan said in his opening remarks, it's a pleasure just to be in a room full of living, breathing people. I think we're probably all agreed that amongst many other solutions to our problems, I think the simple togetherness of people, both like-minded and in enthusiastic, combative conversation with one another, I think that's the environment in which our solutions will be found. Ordinarily, when invited to speak, I indulge myself with freeballing and riffing on a few thoughts. Some might say making things up as I go along. But given the gravity, I think, of the situation in which we find ourselves, and also because time is relatively short, unusually for me, I've written something down. And if you'll bear with me, I would like to largely read to you from those thoughts rather than just extemporising. Having said that, I'll start not with my own words, but the words of Humbert Wolff in Requiem for a Soldier. Down some cold field in a world outspoken, the young men are walking together, slim and tall. And though they laugh to one another, silence is not broken. There is no sound, however clear they call. They are speaking together of what they loved in vain here, but the air is too thin to carry the things they say. They were young and golden, but they came on pain here, and their youth is age now, their gold is grey. Yet their hearts are not changed, and they cry to one another. What have they done with the lives we laid aside? Are they young with our youth, gold with our gold, my brother? Do they smile in the face of death because we died? Down some cold field in a world uncharted, the young seek each other with questioning eyes. They question each other, the young, the golden-hearted, of the world that they were robbed of in their quiet paradise. Requiem for a Soldier. I think about those lives of young men over and over. What have they done with the lives we laid aside, they ask. Are they young with our youth, gold with our gold, my brother? Do they laugh in the face of death because we died? This is the time of remembrance. This is the time of year when we promise the dead, and perhaps more importantly each other, that we will defend the peace and the freedoms for which our ancestors paid with their young lives. But those words, those promises we make are only hollow and empty, however, if we do no more than speak them. Defence of freedom must be lived out and enacted every moment of every day, ideally, and thereby made real and kept vivid with the flowing blood of the living. If we mouth the words about defending freedom and yet stand aside while those freedoms are eroded and erased, then we dishonour the dead and also each other. In the civilised West, we have known peace in the main since the end of the Second World War. There have been countless conflicts since, of course there have, and our fighting men and women have been in harm's way over and over again. But for most of us here in our homes, we have known unprecedented peace and freedom for more than 70 years. It's my belief that we have lived in peace and freedom for so long, longer than the biblical 70 years and 10, that we've lived that way for so long that too many of us have come to take those gifts utterly for granted. So taken for granted are our freedoms now. We've allowed ourselves to believe that the way we have lived here for a few decades is somehow natural, that freedom such as we have known is in the natural order of things. But of course, even the most cursory look at history reveals that our way of life here has been the most unnatural of any yet seen on planet Earth. Our way of peace and freedom has been nothing less than bizarre by comparison to everything else that has gone before. We live inside a miraculous soap bubble of the utmost fragility. Or you might say that rather we exist in a penthouse flat at the top of a great tower. We've been afforded the best views in the history of humankind, but only because we are held aloft by that tower, made of centuries and millennia of suffering and sacrifice. And in so many ways now, we seem to be kicking at the masonry and the planks that are holding us up. And if we do away with that tower, where will we be? We will not remain aloft. Every significant civilization before ours, every kingdom and empire was a dictatorship built on the slavery and exploitation of the masses by a tiny elite that persuaded or frightened everyone in its thrall into accepting that only a tiny handful of special people deserved an elegant and elevated life. Babylon, Egypt, Greece, Persia, Rome, Ottoman, every one of them built on and by slaves whose lives were deemed to matter not at all. That is the natural order of things. That is how things were for most people almost all of the time. It is awareness of that fact, constant awareness, that should make us see how blessedly unnatural our way of life has been for what amounts to just a few ridiculously lucky generations in the scheme of things. For a couple of centuries, and on account of a sequence of events nothing short of miraculous, something different has flowered here. The end of slavery, votes for the masses, education for all, rule of law, equality of men and women, tolerance of religions, tolerance of sexuality. It has not been perfect. Some would say it has been a long way from perfect. But when I hear what we have had run down and damned with endless criticism, what I want to shout is, compared to where? And compared to what? I have long been fascinated by Francis Hutcheson, who had the chair of moral philosophy at Glasgow University during the time known as the Scottish Enlightenment. He taught that by acting morally and demanding the happiness of others, a person might make him or herself a happiness of the most lasting and meaningful kind. Happiness was not a random gift from God, but rather the product of acting morally towards others. One of his students was John Witherspoon, second president of Princeton and a signatory of the Declaration of Independence. And there are good reasons for thinking that the concept of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness come from the thinking of Francis Hutcheson. But there you have it. Happiness is a collateral benefit of being moral, of living morally. What has been done these past months has not, I say, been moral. People's lives have been stopped, children's educations set aside, livelihoods destroyed, people's physical and mental health compromised, in many ways beyond repair, people left isolated, society atomized. This has been immoral. The price paid in hopes of controlling a virus and more recently halting climate change has been too high. All around the world, in Canada and North America, throughout Europe, in Australia and New Zealand, in Israel, in South Africa, governments are quite simply stamping on the rights of their populations. Rubber bullets and pepper spray, overmighty police forces, the deployment of psychological tricks and tactics and nudge units, fear and propaganda. In Austria, they're segregating the population, dividing the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, identifying the clean and the unclean, the good and the bad, the return of the Untermensch. This is immoral. Just because a government makes something law does not necessarily make it moral, far less good. History is littered with the damage caused when governments passed immoral laws for whatever reason. In every one of those countries, ours included, any power invested in government is a loan from the people. None of those populations voted to be ruled by its government. Rulership is the obsession of kings, emperors, and other despots. Democratic governments exist or should exist to defend freedom, to enable people to go about their lives and to make the best of them. With every day that passes, it becomes harder to avoid the conclusion that our Western civilization is being dismantled piece by piece by those that would see it gone forever and replaced with something else. It remains to be seen what that something else might be, or what we, the proletariat, will be allowed to do there. We've also been provoked about pronouns and gender. We've been told to see ourselves first and foremost as skin colours and religions. We've been told to focus on our immutable differences. We've been told to feel shame about our history and culture. We've been told to forget about owning cars and taking advantage of international travel. We must contemplate smaller, colder lives. We are told this by people who say one thing and do another. Whatever new life awaits the mass of us, those sending us on our way are clearly intending to carry on as they have always done. The hypocrisy of our leaders and elites must surely stick in our throats. Always we must ask ourselves, who benefits from all of this? During the pandemic, billionaires have seen the greatest ever increase in their personal wealth. For the elite, it has been a good war. Advantage has been taken of a situation. The situation has been the virus and more recently the promise of an apocalypse made of climate change. Millions of people have been frightened and deliberately into a submissive state of mind. Freedom has been traded for an illusion of security. What I feel around me more than fear, angst, anxiety, and uncertainty is loss of confidence. I think that loss of confidence has been coming for a while and that these past months have only highlighted and accelerated the process. Kenneth Clark, the art historian, not the politician, has written and broadcast in decades past very persuasively about civilization and the necessary building blocks thereof. And he expresses how more than anything else, meaningful civilization requires confidence. Confidence in the society in which we live, belief in its philosophy, belief in its laws, and confidence in our own mental powers as functioning individuals. All the great civilizations have had a weight of positive energy behind them. People think civilization is about fine buildings, the arts and culture, education for all, equality before the law, fine sensibilities and good conversation. These are among the results of civilization, but they are not what make a civilization. A society can have all of these niceties and yet still fail. Civilizations like Rome and Greece collapsed on account of exhaustion. In his poem, Waiting for the Barbarians, modern Greek poet C.P. Cavafy described the inhabitants of a grand city waiting behind their walls for the arrival of barbarians known to be massing nearby. Such is the hopeless state of mind of the city dwellers. They're actually looking forward to the invasion just because it promises change from all that now bores them, all that they have taken for granted. Then news arrives that the barbarians have moved on. Now what's going to happen to us without barbarians, they ask. Those people were a kind of solution. I started with the words of Humbert Wolff, a British-Italian man of letters. In his work, Uncelestial City, he wrote, "You cannot hope to bribe or twist, thank God, the British journalist, but seeing what that man will do unbribed, there's no occasion to." Our mainstream media, bribed or not, has been greatly to blame for what has unfolded here these months past. There's been a narrative made dominant and all but irresistible by the enthusiasm of the majority of the media for cheerleading the manipulation of the majority of the people into a frightened, angst-ridden, compliant state. This is lamentable, but not new and not surprising either for anyone who has paid attention to history. Now, enough already with the doom and gloom. I'm among the first to admit that I have what might accurately be described as miserable bastard tendencies. As they do say, it's never hard to discern the difference between a Scotsman and a ray of sunshine. If anyone were to describe me thus, it would not be for the first time. Fortunately, I am aware of my own tendencies and I do seek to find the antidote for myself. I believe that hope is not just a good thing, but also irresistible. Hope is as perennial as the grass and as determined. It cannot be kept down, not even by marching boots and concrete. It can be tempting to think that entities may grow too big to fail. At the moment, we're in the grip of an unholy alliance between big state, big business, and technocrats. So much seems to be going their way. But history shows that entities inevitably grow so big that they can only fail. The energy required to keep millions or billions of people under control and going against their better, hopeful natures is ruinous. Such an effort is doomed to exhaustion by its sheer scale. It's simply too much hard work. Bad ideas fail, always. Good ideas cannot be kept down. The return to better days will be led by those who have paid attention to history and so know that hope, like the grass, needs only the light of day. As it says in the Talmud, every blade of grass has its angel that bends over it, whispering, grow, grow. I believe that what we have watched since the spring of last year or thereabouts is an exercise in hubris, which is to say overconfidence on the part of those who sought to take advantage of a situation so as to seek ends that might otherwise have remained out of reach. But too many people have been made unhappy, and that situation will not sustain. History also shows us that it does not take the majority of a population or anything like it to make the difference that matters. Rather, history shows that it only takes a handful of hopeful people to let in the light. Price's law, as I understand it, says that the square root of the number of people in any organisation does 50% of the work, which is to say that if you have 10,000 people in your organisation, 50% of the work is down to just 100 of those people. That might be hard to believe, but it's proven in every case. It's not unlike the Pareto principle that does everything right down to and including predicting the propagation of a gas in a vacuum. Perhaps above all else, what is needed is just for some few of us to acknowledge that we here in this part of the world have been the luckiest in the story of creation so far. What we have had, this fragile soap bubble, this tower built of the sacrifice and endeavour of others, is the greatest gift any generation has ever been granted. Ensuring that gift might be handed on to our children demands that we first recognise and then commit ourselves to maintaining that which we have had. Thanks very much.